Lynsey, how about we just start with you and just find out how you're doing and where you're at in the world and what you're up to.
Thank you, Mark. So as Regan's already explained, I attended the workshop in November, and I think it was Monday to Friday. So by the Monday the following week, I was already using the resources and the materials that I took away from the workshop. I think the beauty of the workshop is that you go in with a real business problem to solve regarding organisation design. You use that as the backdrop for all of the workshop, and it helps you really think about how you're going to apply all of that learning that you've taken away and what you're going to do differently as a result of attending the workshop. So I've essentially been using the materials from day one back in work. And I've been working on 2 specific projects for organisation design since then. So the materials that you get to take away are all of the materials used in the workshop from day 1 all the way through to day 5, including anything else that crops up that might be of relevance to anybody in the room. And you get that both electronically, also within a hand, quite a chunky folder to take away, which means that I've got everything to hand, whether I'm working remotely or I'm in the office or I'm in my home office. And I find that pretty much covers 98% of the questions that I might have. And I know for those really complex ones, that both Peter and Mark are on hand to answer them whenever I need it. And as such, I think I joined a drop-in, maybe not last week, the week before, to do exactly that, just to get that little bit of support and guidance to take me forward into that next stage.
So Lynsey, thanks for that. Where are you calling in from?
From my home office, based in the northwest of England, so
Gotcha,
Southport. Yeah.
And just along with your, I guess, with your introduction there, Andre, we had asked Lynsey to join us just to talk about her experience. And so thank you for that, Lynsey. Hey, Lynsey, I have a question for you, which is how critical has it been for you to have the support of your leader in doing this work?
I think I would find it difficult to be doing what I'm doing without having that air cover in place. I think one of my really tricky projects is about changing the way that we operate the whole of our research and development function. And so it's quite a critical change, quite a critical project. It is creating the need for a complete shift of mindset with the way that we operate within that function. And also thinking about that, a function as a mindset even. And we're asking a lot of our leaders and also the teams within that particular function. And Jilly, my direct line manager, I think she's quite a few years into her organisation design experience, and she's really able to provide that guidance and context that I need to be able to help those leaders transition the way that they think about organisation design, because it will transform the way that you think about it. I think one of the wisdoms I took away from the workshop is that, I will become that expert within the organisation. It really does feel like you are building that skill set up that you perhaps didn't realise you didn't have, but then you all of a sudden have it. But, it's not to underestimate the fact that you will know a lot more about organisation design than your leaders. So you have to really coach and work with those leaders to really think differently about some of the changes that they're trying to make.
Thank you for that. So one of the things, Andre, that Peter and I, the way we set up our any skill building workshop is to make sure that the delegates coming through the workshop are completely supported by their line manager and their line manager. In this case, Jilly is the CHRO. But one of the things that I think a lot of people attend org design training, but what I don't see in what you should look for when you're choosing one is what's the preparation work done before you get in the workshop, because Lynsey, and correct me if I'm wrong, we talk about being a free radical, that you have to be able to just go where the work goes and go 2 levels above your boss's pay grade. And you just need to be able to go and work with whoever needs to be worked with. And that kind of support is always a bit of a challenge. And so how much of a free radical are you being in terms of your current work, org design work?
Is that a question to me, Mark? Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I guess it's a really good question, because it's a really good challenge. I think I'm really trying to seek that balance between knowing that this feels really new to a lot of our business leaders, and it will transform the way that they think about business change, certainly around how they design their organization. And so I think I'm being a slow radical, in the sense that I'm really trying to help them come along on that journey, but I'm working to their pace. So what I'm finding is that because this is quite a fundamental shift of the way that we operate our research and development organization, and there's a lot of stakeholder management within that, I'm really trying to help build their knowledge of and their confidence in really trying to transform the way that we do R&D today.
Yeah, it's such, it's Peter and I talk about, it's one of the 3 reasons these projects fails, is that you're not doing the proper stakeholder work, and getting ahead of all those leaders would be a massive risk on you and Jilly's part. So you really have to bring those leaders along, because you're challenging the way they look at the world, and probably how they go about a real change, as opposed to just moving people around and changing reporting relationships.
Absolutely.
So,
I'm going slow to go fast.
Yeah, well, and we also talk about don't get ahead of your leaders, right? Because you can't push a rope. So the big part of this work in design work is making sure everyone's lined up from a readiness perspective. Peter, you must have some comments on this.
I was thinking very much about evolution. So for new readers, I first met Mark over 20 years ago, when I was in Royal Mail, and we were looking to develop our HR business partners, and one of the areas for development was organisation development. Now we had a lot of business partners in those days, because we were a 200,000 employee organisation. But my reflection on that was, in the early days, the early business partners to go through the training were very much like Lynsey, and going into it and trying to make change happen properly in an organization that didn't really understand what organization design really was, and what a holistic approach to it was. I guess my reflection on that was, and maybe it gives you a little bit of hope as well, Lynsey, is that as time went on, we obviously continued to run these courses. I think we ran them, you'll correct me on this one wrong, Mark, but we probably ran them one about every 6 months internally for new business partners. Now that might sound like a lot of courses, but what we found happening was that as momentum built, line managers became much more interested. And what was starting to happen is that business partners came along to the courses with their line manager. So they were both being trained together. They were bringing their business problem to the training workshop, to the 5-day workshop, and working in part. Their partnership for design work began in the training, but that's a momentum build. And I think, Mark, you might want to comment on this as well. But in one of our other big multinational clients, we started to see that, where line leaders started to come along to the training with their business partners, or they came to the training as participants, maybe not for the whole thing, but for parts of it. So I think momentum. I think the point I'm trying to make is that this you are the start of a movement, but when that's successful, it becomes a very powerful movement, because the line leaders want to be part of it rather than want to be dragged along.
Yeah, there's never a truer word said. I think that's just hit our problem right on its head, because what I'm finding is there's a real gap between me and the leaders, and I'm really mindful of that gap. So at the moment, it's almost like I am staying put where I am, and I'm trying to really build up the awareness and the understanding of the process. I've revisited the methodology numerous times, and you almost see that light bulb moment for them when they really, really get it. And then you know you can move on. And I had a light bulb moment with one of the senior leaders. He's head of R&D, really quickly, really early on. And he's essentially leading one of those projects and is a key member of the other project, and they're very interlinked. And I've already got that momentum with him, and using him. You know, we're quite a tight-knit team now. We're slowly building that momentum across the rest of the leaders that need to be involved in this. And it's slow and it's painstaking work at times, but we both challenge each other at every point that we have one of those stakeholder interactions as to whether or not we've got it, or actually we need to do a little bit of work. And we hold ourselves back to say there is no point going forward until we have everybody online, because, you know, it's an organization built on its research and development. It's so core to the business that, you know, we have to get everybody on board because it touches every part of the business. And we, you know, we could spend months doing a lot of work on this, and then all of a sudden one person says, whoa, 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 where are you going with this, and can really put a grind and halt on it. There's absolutely no point us investing all of that time if we don't have the cohesive agreement, you know, those explicit agreements up front that allow us to be able to operate this with this methodology and do a really full design project. So we're really taking our time with the stakeholders. It's a very sensitive organizational change, and it's well worth us investing that time up front.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I don't think, Lynsey. I mean, if you get the stakeholdering wrong and you try to go too fast, then I'll use your phrase. You got to mind the gap, as they say on the tube in London. Yeah, if you get too big a gap between you and the stakeholders, then everything just falls through that gap, and you go nowhere.
Yeah.
And kudos to you, Lynsey, that you see that. Reagan, you were going to say something?
Oh, no, I was just going to ask Andre if, you know, listening to any of that or talking about stakeholders, if that brought up any thoughts or questions on his end. I think he's muted right now, though, so that's okay. If he's just listening, I just wanted to check.
Well, just give him a second to respond. Andre, any questions based on what Lynsey or Peter or I were discussing?
Well, Mark, first of all, very interesting to hear about Lynsey's experience, and I'm getting more familiar with the concepts and the orientation of the training. As long as I have participated more in this kind of webinars, and it's very nice to do that. As far as this point, I would like to know, because when I hear the experience, and what the training is about, I think about my own professional career. So and what my experience has been up to now, and I would like to know if the training and the methodology can be applied to a particular area of an organization, and if it's okay to do organizational design to some area, some function, some geography, not necessarily doing the whole organization, the whole company with this methodology. I'm not sure if I'm clear on this, because sometimes you, as an organizational development person in the organization, you are not in charge of a whole redesign, but maybe you're in charge of organization in one particular area or function, as I said before. So do you still can you still use the methodology in this case?
Andre, so you asked the question, can you still use the methodology at an enterprise level? Is that what you're asking?
More precisely, I want to say that, yeah, first of all, at an enterprise level, but when you are not talking about redesigning the whole organization, just one area, one unit, one particular business line, for example.
Let me, I'm gonna answer it simply for you. And then I'm gonna have maybe Lynsey or Peter kind of respond to it. Now, so enterprise, yes. Some part of the business, whether it's a function or a business unit or a team, absolutely. Just the scope of work becomes more focused. However, one of the lessons, and if we play back, and Lynsey, I'm gonna pass this off to you here, it's coming. The pass off is if you listen to Lynsey, she's working with R&D, but the business itself, R&D is very core to the business, to the enterprise that she's working in. So it's critical that Lynsey doesn't just think of R&D, but actually thinks laterally and up and down, meaning the work will impact not just R&D. So Lynsey, that's my pass off to you. Maybe you could talk to what it is that you're seeing, even though you're working on a particular part of the business, how it impacts all the business.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point that you make there, Mark, because I don't know, Andres, what role that you do, but I'm a HR business partner. So I have interactions with leaders across different parts of our business every day. And, you can have a number of conversations each day about different types of business change. And, you have that internal dialogue where you're trying to work out for yourself how big or how small this change is, and whether it's something like a reshuffle of certain roles and teams, or whether it's much more of a deep dive that is required, which means that you are redesigning roles and work activities that sit within particular functions or groups. So I think the answer is that it can be quite universally applied. I can find opportunities through the materials and through all of the things that I've learned in this course. I can find ways in which to use it in isolation to really help, a problem be resolved. Where maybe a leader is stuck, it will help them to unstick that particular problem. However, there may be times where actually you can see that this, if you made a particular change to a team, that it would have repercussions, and therefore actually you have to consider that to be a bigger project. And I will take an example for you that there is a small team within our R&D organization. The team has probably only got about 20 people in there. So on the face of it, it could feel like a very small team, but that team is made up of different members of our science organization that work on a number of projects, from a very long-term project to a very, immediate impact project. So something that might be going in to be manufactured quite quickly and will be on the market quite quickly. And they will therefore have touch points across the organization. And so the complexity of that change has just increased because of the nature of that particular change. So I think it can be used across, different sizes and complexities of the organization. And I think the beauty of the workshop is you feel so skilled at the end of it. And I think there will be some trial and error with it. But there is an opportunity for you to really look across all of those resources that you've just started to understand, and think about how you use some of those to apply to what could be a small or a large project, or something that is quite straightforward or quite complex as well. But it would be part of my role as a business partner to really assess the extent of that change, and therefore how we may approach that problem within the organization.
And I guess what you don't want to be is very heavy-handed with the methodology if it's not needed. So it will be about just sizing that appropriately and using the right tools in that particular situation to really help solve the actual business problem.
Lynsey, one of the wisdoms, and Andre, we have a handful, maybe about 30, 35 wisdoms that we share through the workshop, and one of them being is follow the work, always. Lynsey, to your point, you talked about kind of going where you need to with regards to R&D. Have you been applying that, thinking about what work comes into R&D, what work goes out, and what's the impact if we make changes? Have you been applying that wisdom at all?
Oh yes, absolutely. It's essentially at the core for R&D, and I think it's because throughout every part of the, I guess, the life cycle of R&D, there is a different type of customer. So you essentially do have to follow that work, and you have to see the life cycle of what is R&D. And I think that really helps you to fully understand what the impact would be, and what are the things that you really need to consider as a result of that. Now, with our R&D life cycle, and it's now an R&D life cycle, it wasn't before we started this work, so it's already started to lock down a different way of thinking about how we do R&D in Victrex. But the R&D life cycle itself has a number of different interfaces, and that could be an internal or external customer, and all of those considerations have been brought into the project, and it's how we have developed or at least started to establish the project.
Oh, that's great. Peter, anything to add?
No, I think you picked up on it, Mark. Really, I think the important point is if you're looking at a redesign or change within one part of the organization, you need to be very cognizant of where the boundaries of that work are in relation to the overall work and the overall value chain of the whole organization, and make sure that you are very carefully managing the ins and the outs, so incoming work, outgoing work, and making sure that the work is on the right side of the boundary, and that you understand how the pass-offs between one boundary of work and another boundary of work are actually going to happen. Because one of the things I can almost guarantee you is that if you start looking at one boundary, and I'm sure you'll come across some of this at some point, Lynsey, is you will come to a point where you go, well, you'll either be saying, why are we doing that and not them, or why are they doing that and not us? So you'll start to question whether you've actually got the boundary right. But that's just a natural consequence of applying some really tight focus to work within a current boundary.
Yeah, and one of the things you said, Peter, and then Andre, I'm coming back to you in terms of following the work. Is that one of the mistakes that's made is, okay, we're just going to focus on the people who report to me, which is actually not how real work happens. And so, which is why we are a bit obsessive in our teaching org design, is always going back to basics and following the work. And people, as much as important as they are secondary or sometimes even tertiary to this process. They're important in terms of involving them in the design process itself. But the fact is that if you focus on people and who does what in today's world and who reports to who, you end up doing a restructuring and not a redesign. So Andre, how about it was a good comment. I don't know if we answered your question at all. Maybe you can give us a steer if you don't mind.
Yes, Mark, very clear, all of your comments, and thanks a lot. Just to answer what Lynsey was talking about, I worked for almost 15 years in a company. I was working as a project manager, or sometimes also as a senior specialist within organizational development unit. So at the time I did some organizational design projects, but being in a big multinational corporation with presence in more than 30 countries with more than 8,000 employees, I was obviously not in charge of the whole redesign of the company, which later took place. So this was my question. This was the reason for my question, and because at that time we did not have a methodology. It was more intuitive, the work we did. So I'm happy to hear that in this case you can also apply taking all the precautions that you mentioned, but I'm happy to hear that you can also do it in these cases and in this scenario. Currently, I work as a consultant, so it's not a question I'm worried about, but right now. But as a consultant, you can also try to do this work sometimes not at the whole company level, but at some specific unit or part of the organization. So it's useful to hear that it applies.
Great. Lynsey, any thoughts? One of the things in the workshop, we take you through the methodology and how important, and Peter and I will answer this from our perspective, is because you came in with a lot of experience, Lynsey, I think you were able to grasp the solution organization design and really understand the difference between that and other work you've done previously. My question to you is, how important has it been for you to come in as a tenured, more senior HR practitioner, and how has that facilitated kind of your uptake on the solution itself? Maybe you can talk to that.
Yeah, certainly. So I've always felt like I've been able to do organization design until November 2019, and then I really learned how to do organization design. So I think I recognized that for years before, I'd been asking for and looking for this type of training. I'd tried to find it in different ways through different organizations, didn't quite get what I needed. And then I was introduced to OTM and joined the workshop and really realized that this is exactly what I've been looking for, and was giving me the exact skill that I needed as a business partner to support organizations. So for me, it's been a fundamental shift between me feeling like, it's just, some part of what I could do, to it being an absolute skill set. For me, and it's such a critical component to a strategic business partner. Andres, I could feel the same for you, that if you're a consultant, you will want to feel like the expert. And I think the one learning that I've really taken away from the week with OTM is that I really truly did feel like an expert by the end of it. And, I could then look back and see how I really hadn't grasped it before. And as much passion as I could put into it, I didn't really have any methodology locked down. And then I came away and I fully understood that. And I had all of the resources to help me really apply it to a business with immediate effect. And so for me, it was quite a transformational week. Does that answer your question, Mark?
A little deeper, if you don't mind. It does answer the question. Putting you on the spot is, you came into the workshop thinking you've done org design, and then you came out of the workshop thinking, holy heck, I haven't done org design. Now I really see for what it is. One of our wisdoms is we're going to change the way you look at work, right? We talk about seeing the mayor. What's the difference between you walking in thinking, okay, I've done org design, and what did you think it was versus when you walked out?
It was probably halfway through for the first couple of days, and it's probably important to describe that 5-day process for Andres, that you walk through that methodology, don't you, from day 1 through to day 5, so you see that full life cycle the methodology. It was probably halfway through that I really felt that I was being equipped with, you know, a skill for a lifetime. And it really is about the way that you then shift your mindset, and you really do need to feel like you are shifting that mindset. I think I'd make the comment probably on around day 3 that it felt like, is it the Matrix, where or it was like some sort of a film where all of a sudden you just see things so differently, and there's a moment of clarity where it all starts to come together. And you really see the organization design methodology for what it really is. So it can take a couple of days as you're deep diving in, but then you come out of it really feeling like it's locking together and it's really piecing itself together. And then you can consolidate that learning on day 5 and probably the end of day 4. And that really helps you to bring that together then as well. So I think you do go on that journey, that learning journey yourself through, you know, days 1 to 5, and there is that light bulb moment for you.
It is one of the dilemmas, Lynsey, where Peter and I, we've talked about this. The 5-day is really a psychological journey where the first 2 days are really, you're trying to make sense of it in your own, in the mindset and paradigm that you walked in with. And part of the 5-day workshop is about day 2 or the morning of day 3 is to get you to realize that org design does not fit in the paradigm that you walked in with, your psychological paradigm. And it sounds like you had that same experience. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So all of a sudden your thinking changes, and then mentally you're actually working yourself back to day 1 and relearning all of the things that you've tried to teach us, to really help lock that down, because by day 3 you're certainly feeling, you know, and thinking different. And there is that journey that you do go on. And I don't say that lightly, because it does feel like you have that psychological change within the way that you think about organization structures, and all of a sudden you're starting to put a different lens on things. And it will be halfway through, I would say, that you start to really feel like that's becoming really apparent to yourself, and there's that light bulb moment, and then there's that moment where you have to go back and think, okay, so what have I learned day 1 to 2? Catch yourself up a little bit, and then start to really lock down that learning by using the real life, you know, business dilemma that you've brought in to the room to really help you to apply that learning into the, you know, the business context that you're operating.
It's part of our dilemma, and then Peter, I'm going to pass it off to you. Part of our dilemma is people say, well, can't you just do this in 2 days, or can't you just do this in 3 days? And we've done that, and we offer something, but it's also the difference in the 5-day is we find, I mean, pretty consistently what you've just described is it takes 2 to 2.5 days for people to quit fighting it and trying to push it into the paradigm that they walked in with, and actually change their entire paradigm of how they look at the business and redesign. Peter, anything you want to add to that?
I think the thing I would add, and yeah, I think a part of the problem lies in the mindset of the HR profession, and to some extent the line leaders' expectations of the HR profession. So most people, organization design, and we'll say it over and over again in the workshop, it's all about the work, and it's about really getting a sound understanding of the work and how you put boundaries around that work, and then how you slowly start to put that work into jobs, into roles, and then those roles into jobs, and then start to overlay the management on it. And that is the only logical way to be able to do organization design. You've got to start from the strategy, get to the work. The problem is that the mindset from the beginning of your career in HR is it's all about the people, and often it starts being all about the management. So far too often people's experience of organization design has been around changing some management roles and then changing, trying to change the people below that without ever really starting to think about the work. And I think one of the big light bulb moments, and one of the things I love seeing when we're running these workshops, is when people start to understand what we mean when we say it's all about the work, and we say that, yeah, we don't care about people. I mean, obviously we do care about people, but when you're doing organization design, if you start with the people, which is where HR normally begins, you wrap yourself around the axle and you never come out with the right solution. So I'm always aware, and this is a bit UK centric, because I know what the CIPD preach, and I see what happens in HR functions in UK and European organisations, but I'm sure it's not much different anywhere else in the world. The profession creates its own problem, and the HR profession is its own worst enemy when it comes to organisation design. And then I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, Peter, you failed to mention that you were an HR professional, so you had that.
Yeah, I wonder why I failed to mention that.
Exactly. But it's not exclusive to you, Peter, or Lynsey. Lynsey, one of the things we teach, and maybe you could talk to this since your experience probably is more current, but to Peter's point, which is sometimes we talk about doing this work from a process perspective and kind of being a change agent, not just going out and telling and jumping because someone asks you to do X. Sometimes, as Peter said, HR is its worst enemy because it's nice to be needed and you want to be needed. And so you're just doing things. How is what you're doing now with the business, how is that different than the role you've previously played with HR, and maybe you can talk to that a little bit.
That's an interesting question, actually, Mark, because I think when I first brought this project to the table, it was something that I'd been planting a seed around for a number of months. So I was quite new to Victrex. I think I was about 12 months in when I joined the workshop. It was something that I'd brought to the table of one of our quite senior leaders as a problem. It was a problem that person didn't want to even consider. It was a known problem, but it was almost too difficult to tackle. And it took months and months of just planting that seed and letting it grow to a point where there was some sort of a catalyst, and it was like, right, we've got to grab this opportunity. And when that opportunity was grabbed, there was another leader who was assigned with the task to lead this project. And I think, I'll use the term, it's a very British term, but it's like having the Marks and Spencer's elbows, you're sort of muscling yourself into, to have a seat at the table. And I was a bit of that free radical that you explained earlier on in the call, that actually, I had a lot to say about it and I wanted to be part of it, and I had loads of energy, and actually I'd done a lot of the hard work beforehand to even get this on the table for that senior leader to even say, yes, this is absolutely something that we now need to look at. And it took two senior leaders who were essentially, finding this their problem to deal with. It took them a good few weeks to realize that I had a lot of good things to say, and everything that I said had logic and rationale behind it. And I seemed to talk with some confidence, and there was a lot of expertise behind what I said. And I think over time they realized that I wasn't the HR business partner, but I was a business partner of a different type. And I was able to facilitate their thinking and provide the structure around the way that they could think about this. And I could provide a rationale for doing it differently to how it's been done before. And there still is some resistance, but a pep talk helps to just keep that on track. But there was a comment made only recently where one of them said, oh, I really understand the role that you can play now where I didn't before. And I think it's that transition between, they come to me and they've got a HR problem. And, we deal with, different aspects of people. but this was the first time that, you know, I think I had any credibility when it came to organization design, and I really could lead on that for the business with quite senior leaders as well. So there was a real step change in terms of my position there. And it gave me some real credibility, but to a point where I'd earned it through everything that I've learned from this workshop and everything that I've learned from OTM. And it was applying that directly to the business problem that we're trying to resolve and saying, actually, you know, this makes logical sense. This feels like the right thing to do. And it will be harder, but we're guaranteed better results at the end of it. You know, it was almost too good for them to argue with anymore. And quite slowly, but over time, we've now got there. They really have embraced it, and you know, they trust and respect me as their business partner to drive this project and to deliver it. And I think that's a real turning point for the leadership team that I'm working with, because I think before that, I didn't necessarily have that position. And as you say, Peter, sometimes HR can be its own worst enemy, and especially when you have the likes of CIPD to fall back on, because it doesn't necessarily give you the, you know, exactly what you're looking for. But sometimes you do struggle to find it anywhere else. So if it's not with CIPD, where do you get it from? I've certainly gone to CIPD for this exact type of organization design expertise and didn't get it, and then all of a sudden I feel like I've got it, and there's a real difference between, you know, the skills I had before and the skill set I've got after the workshop.
No, I think it's a fair point, Lynsey, about, you know, you go to your own professional organisation, and if your own professional organisation isn't serving you well, then it is very hard to find alternatives. But we at OTM try our best to you know, to get ourselves on the radar, because I think that, you know, as you know, I think we can offer a you know, a proven solution.
But also behind that proven solution, Peter, that you used it quite a few times, you were talking about some of the, you know, the return on investment from that as well. You know, you can, there's like a 20% savings cost, or, you know, it's providing that real backdrop and evidence, isn't it, as well behind it, you know. And if you've got that real gravitas connected to the methodology, then it really has stood me in good stead in being able to articulate that in a way that says these are proven results. You know, this methodology works, this is why it works, this is how it can work for you. And it really helps to get that buy-in early on to say, you know, you start off and it can feel like you're doing a lot of the work. And then the further you go through that cycle, the more you can speed up, because you're doing a lot of that hard work earlier on. You know, think about how long it's taken me around stakeholder management, but you're getting all of those fundamentals in place, and then you move on. But without a doubt, it's hard work for the business and it's hard work for me, but it's absolutely worth it, because you know you have proven results at the end of it.
Yeah, and yeah, you're drawing on. It's a great example of what another of the OTM wisdoms that Mark referred to. The go slow to go fast. You know, you've got to spend that time up front, and you know, getting that complete alignment and that complete engagement. Otherwise, you'll trip up later on. But if you've got that, you then build momentum and can move at pace.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're just about out of time. Andre, any final questions from you? And I do want to ask Lynsey another question, but let's keep going. Andre.
Yes, Mark, thank you. This is more a practical question, and it has to do with the final product you deliver after you go through the training. I mean, the methodology teaches you how to, for example, redesign not only the organizational structure, but do you go with some process redesign, or, for example, do you deliver at the end roles, jobs, job descriptions, maybe job evaluation, job mapping, and something that it's more sensitive, the sizing of each organizational unit you redesign. As you see, this is more a practical question on how deep you go on on the methodology? Does it teaches all this?
In short, yes. In fact, we leave no stone unturned, but we start
Okay.
with the most strategic of questions to be answered, and then get to that level of detail during what we call the detailed design, which is where we get to the roles and jobs footprint. One of the things we don't do, Andre, which would be maybe different for Lynsey, as Lynsey's leading an effort as an internal HR business partner, my guess is, Lynsey, you would push the job descriptions. So as a consulting firm, we provide all the information and input for a job description to be written, but we would not ourselves write the job description. Lynsey, I imagine you have to have a team as well. One of the things we talk about, Andre, is Lynsey can't do this work by herself. There's documentation, there's job descriptions to be written. Lynsey, I'm assuming you'd have the support of others behind you when you get to that level of detail, right?
Absolutely, yes. I think it's part of the explicit agreement up front that actually there's resource required to be able to deliver this project from start to finish. So part of the mapping that we're doing within this project is trying to determine what type of extra resource we need and when we think we will need to pull on that additional resource. So that may be some of my HR colleagues' back office, and it also is within our central project team, because there will be a point where we have to transition work from where it was to where it needs to be. And I think that alone requires real project oversight. And so we're being really clear upfront with a lot of our stakeholders. So we're as open and honest as we can be and as transparent as we can be around, you know, how much effort and resources required. And I think it's all part of that initial agreement up front. So everyone knows what they're buying into. But we're certainly now agreeing to and locking down that project resource and also the back office support that I need from my own team.
One of the things we talk about when you're moving into, from you've got the design and you're moving through transition planning and into implementation, is you do need a robust HR work stream running behind running behind the scenes to do a lot of the things that you referred to, Andreas. So you do have to get job descriptions done, you do have to get job evaluation done. Ultimately, you do have to have all those traditional HR service elements need to be in place, to do contracts, to make sure you've got the learning and development interventions in place that you need. So that whole HR work stream is, as Lynsey said, it's a big planning effort. It's also one that needs stakeholdering, because people need to understand that there is a lot of effort that needs to go on behind the actual design work to enable it to be effectively implemented.
We have to build on Lynsey and Peter's comment here, is it all gets connected back to demand of work. So what creates value for your customers, whether internal or external, and then what is the work that needs to be completed to generate that value, and then the roles and jobs all get connected together. So the importance of data, the importance of really understanding the economics of the business and the demand of the business before you get to people, jobs, and roles and jobs. It all fits together when you get to that level of detail, but it's really important that you really understand what work it is that you're trying to do. So with that in mind, we've come to about a minute to go, and I just want to kind of summarize a couple of things. And Peter, Lynsey, I'm going to ask you to add a couple of things. It's important that before you get in the workshop, that these workshops are set up correctly. Peter and I feel very strongly that if you don't get set up correctly before you come into the workshop, you're just throwing mud against the wall. Which is maybe okay for some people, but it's a big investment. And we think to get the maximum out of it is you got to do the right work up front. The thing that we train in our workshop is we train the actual doing. Since Peter and I have done this work for over a long time, over 30 years, is what you get from us is not only step-by-step methodology, but all the things in between and the wisdom, such as managing the stakeholders, following the work, and things that you just can't get from someone who's just doing a training program who's never done this work. And then the other piece is obviously is the follow-up and support and in the materials. I guess, Lynsey, to you, before I pass off to Peter, Lynsey, anything in hindsight for you that you feel like you'd want to emphasize in terms of our masterclass?
I think I probably underestimated how much support comes afterwards, and that is invaluable because, you know, I can imagine how many organization design projects I'm going to be involved in the future, and I just know that I have, you know, a massive resource to tap into, and I think we'll be forever friends, Mark and Peter, because I'm sure we'll have questions for a long time to come, and I know you'll have the answers as well. So I think that's an invaluable part of the support and the offering, you know, built into the workshop. So it's something that I don't think I appreciated before, but I truly appreciate now.
Peter, anything?
I think not much more to add. I think the important thing is to recognise that the workshop is part of a fairly long-term development program, skills development program. So yes, you probably don't come in knowing a lot. Yes, you go out knowing a lot, but as Lynsey, I think, has articulated well, it's only as you start to apply the learning that it really starts to embed, and you start to create value for the business and get the return on investment that the business has made in you.
Yeah, so with that, Lynsey, first of all, our sincere thank you for spending an hour with us. We know your time is hugely valuable, and it's always great to hear the progress you're making. So thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You're well, really, it's our honor. And Andre, we hope you're well, and we hope this was a good use of your hour as well. And you certainly feel free to send us an email with follow-up questions or anything else you might have. Did you want to add something, please, Andre?
No, just thank you, everyone. It was very clear and very useful, this webinar. And as far as I'm concerned, it's very clear. Of course, I will get in touch with you later on for sure.
All right, Andre, all the best. Lynsey, have a lovely rest of your afternoon. Peter, thanks for
Thank you. You too. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
popping in, and Reagan, thanks for setting this up.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye, Lynsey. Bye.
Bye.